Well, hello there. Welcome to my channel, In Search of Wonder. My name is Anne, and this is my weekly reading vlog. It is Saturday evening, and I am going to start off this weekly reading vlog. Today we had a busy day, although we got to sleep in a little bit this morning, but then we had to run some errands, and then I was privileged to be able to play the piano at a memorial service for the daughter of a friend of mine. And then we came home after that, and we had an hour and a half to get ready for my family to come over to celebrate my brother-in-law's birthday. And so it was a mad rush of last minute cleaning and cooking and making two huge vats of mac and cheese and all kinds of stuff. Very busy. I was reading this book, not a Sparrow Falls. I was reading it in the car. My husband was driving, and on our way back home from the memorial service, I got like this close to the end, and there were really dramatic things happening. Now, I knew it would end well. I had a general sense where the story was going to end, but I couldn't remember how. This was a reread, if you don't remember. And so, but like I said, the minute we got home, we had to hit the ground running, getting ready for a deluge of family members to come to our house. So it's now 9:30, and I just now sat down to finish reading it. So, yes. I really enjoyed this reread of it. I'm gonna say 4.5 stars. It definitely has 5-star qualities in the pull of the story. You get drawn into the characters' lives. You are rooting for them, you're cheering for them, you're turning the pages, wanting to read, wanting to finish it. It's definitely compelling and gripping, all of those things. So in that sense, it's totally worth 5 stars for me. And it's one that actually really stuck with me, probably more than the others. So in that sense, it's worth 5 stars. But I also remember not loving it completely. I think there's just a few things that happen that just feel a little bit out of character, maybe, for the way the characters are presented as being in the story. It's another one of those situations where I feel like so many themes and issues were crammed into one book. And it felt pretty cohesive, and it didn't feel like the author was slighting any of those themes or storylines like I have felt in some books where there's just so much going on. It does feel like each of those themes was fully developed to the extent that it needed to be in this book. But there's mental health in this story. There's suicide. It doesn't happen on page. It's something that happened in the past, and people talk about it. And the aftermath of it on the remaining family members is discussed and dealt with. There's, as I mentioned in last week's reading vlog, if you watched me then, there's mention of drug use and description of drug use. There's church drama. There's a lot of things. There's secrets is a big theme. Keeping secrets, and also like not being open with each other about how you're really feeling. There's primarily the main character's perspective, which is Bridie, as she's called through most of the book. But we also occasionally hear from her grandmother. We get her perspective. We occasionally hear from a teenage girl named Samantha. We occasionally hear from a middle-aged woman named Lorna. And then we also get in the head of one of the sort of villains in the story, and then another definite villain of the story we get in his head sometimes. So there's a lot of perspective happening, and there's just a lot going on, and it does create a cohesive story. And I didn't notice any like dropped threads or plot holes. I didn't think that anything was underdeveloped. So it worked, but it still was a lot. So there was that. But the main thing I think that keeps me from giving it a full 5 stars, like 4.5 definitely, but the main thing is that there are just some aspects of the story that I felt like really weren't realistic. I mean, I know it's fiction, but I feel like it was uncharacteristic for the situation that was being set up. And could it really happen that way? It seemed far-fetched to me. But It was very enjoyable. I do want to mention a couple of things. One, I loved the grandmother character. Her name is Hattie. Loved her closeness with the Lord, and the way she's present throughout the book, even though she's not. The author really did a great job with that. And the other thing that I want to mention is that this book does deal with like this drama happening in a church. And I feel like more Christian fiction authors need to tackle this more. Church drama and church trauma and church hurt, that kind of stuff, like dealing with it in a scriptural biblical way. And yeah, because I think that wasn't a primary focus in this book. It was more of something that was kind of driving the plot. Sorry, I was interrupted. I'm not sure where I was, but the church drama, like there's this congregation where the pastor he takes on like this radio ministry, and he's writing books and that kind of stuff, and he's just spread too thin, on top of which he's struggling with his spiritual life and with his faith. And so he's like burning his candle at both ends, and he's not really serving his church. And so the church is disgruntled with him, and so they're trying to manipulate him into resigning. And so there's all this stuff going on. It's not the point of this story. It's kind of just driving the plot in a way and leading to the conclusion of the story. So it's not like really dealing with that too much. And the way that everything resolves in that end is not necessarily like the author trying to say this is how drama in a church should be dealt with. In fact, it's one of those things that was kind of maybe unrealistic, that things would really work out that way. However, I just appreciated that the author was even willing to address that, because it's a real thing. I mean, a church is full of sinners, saved by grace, but we're all sinners. And so instead of ignoring that fact and trying to pretend that, everything is fine all the time, always. I've been a pastor's daughter, and I've been very close to leadership in churches for my whole entire life. And I can tell you, there's not a perfect person. There's not a perfect church. My father-in-law says, if you find a perfect church, don't join it because you'll ruin it. That is so true. So anyway, it's definitely something we can't just ignore and pretend that we're all fine, everything's fine, nothing ever goes bad, nothing ever happens wrong in a church. Like I think it should be dealt with. And I think dealing with it in story is a good way to do that, right? So anyway, I appreciated that about this book, that at least it was a topic in the story and it wasn't like brushed under the rug or, ignored. So that is a book that I finished. And now it is time for me to draw another card. So, all right, got my cards. Little shuffling. I don't really want to do a 7 again because I don't want to do a poll. So if I do another 7, I might just pick another one. Is that terrible? Okay, I'm not looking. I'm just going to randomly pick a card here from the middle. Yes, not a 7. So this is a 10. I say that because I got a 7 last week, and then when you do a poll, then you have to wait for people to respond to it. And I just want to know what I'm reading next, okay? So 10. Your initials in the title. 1 point for your first initial, 3 points for your first and last initial, 5 points for your first, middle, and last initial. Okay, let's think through my TBR and see if I can find anything from that. So, the gossip story has my last initial in it, but not my first or middle. The History of England has all 3. That's by Jane Austen. That would be a quick read. I could do that. And that is for Jane Austen July, but it also goes for Chantel's Read Your Shelf Challenge, although it's a book I've had on my shelf that I've read. It's not a book I need to read on my shelf. So I still want to read my other book for that, which is The Other Princess. But The Other Princess only has 1 of my initials. And what else was in my TBR? Oh, Charlotte. Charlotte has 2 of my initials, but it doesn't work. Only has my first and middle, not my first and last. So what was the one that I said that had all 3? Rewind the tape. The History of England. The only other thing would be the Unselected Journals of Emma M. Lyon. So I could do that one. I want to read volume 7. At the same time, I kind of want to read the History of England, and it's really quick. And then, you know, once I read that one, then I can, it won't take me long at all. And then I can read another one. Let's do that. I'm going to do the History of England because, yes, that has all of my initials in it, and that will be perfect. Okay, I've made my decision. Here we go. 20 minutes later, already finished the History of England. So hilarious. Jane Austen's humor is front and center. It's fantastic. I love it. I'll just read her very first entry. Henry IV. Henry IV ascended the throne of England, much to his own satisfaction, in the year 1399, after having prevailed on his cousin and predecessor Richard II to resign it to him, and to retire for the rest of his life to Pomfret Castle, where he happened to be murdered. It is to be supposed that Henry was married, since he certainly had 4 sons, but it is not in my power to inform the reader who was his wife. Be this as it may, he did not live forever, but falling ill, his son the Prince of Wales came and took away the crown, whereupon the king made a long speech, for which I must refer the reader to Shakespeare's plays, and the prince made a still longer. Things being thus settled between them, the king died, and was succeeded by his son Henry, who had previously beat Sir William Gascoigne. I don't know how you say that. Anyway, and it continues in like manner. In particular, her supposed opinions regarding Mary Queen of Scots and Queen Elizabeth I. Hilarious. Editing in here to say, just to be clear, that book did not qualify for the actual Deck of TBR-athon, which I was aware of but forgot to mention. I'm not submitting it as a completed book or anything. I just for my own personal reading. Okay, so time to draw another one. And 2. So 2 is, a monthly readathon. 1 point for Summerween, which I'm not really doing. 3 points for Catch-Up-athon, or 5 points for Jane Austen July. A Gossip Story by Jane West, because I really need to start reading that, or I will not have time to finish it. But I'm probably not going to start that right this minute. I am going to try and finish What Kitty Did Next, and or Jane Austen's bookshelf before I finish that one up. So I'm going to focus. I will have finished with Jane Austen's bookshelf early this coming week, by like Monday or Tuesday. And What Kitty Did Next, I don't know. It's been taking me a while to read it. I'm not even halfway through yet, but I am about a third of the way through. So I'm going to try and finish that one. Whichever one I finish first, the next thing I will pick up is A Gossip Story, but I really need to finish that one. So that's what we're going to do. Hello, I am here at the pool and brought my son here. I didn't drop him off. I stayed here to meet with a friend to go swimming. And so I will probably get in the pool myself in a minute here, but I hadn't made an update yet. Yesterday was crazy. Yesterday was a terrible day. You know, like in that book, horrible, no good, terrible, very bad day, or whatever the order those words go in. That was my day yesterday. So I did not get any reading done until finally in the evening. And even then, like, my thoughts were all scattered. But I did finish reading Jane Austen's bookshelf. Just a quick overview for those of you who don't know anything about the book. The author, Rebecca Romney, looks into the lives of the authors that we know Jane Austen read, in particular the female authors, specifically the female authors. And she also looks at the history in literature since then
for reasons or clues as to why or how they fell out of the regular canon of English classics. And it is an interesting journey that these women's careers took, and how all of them during Jane Austen's lifetime eclipsed her by far. But they traded places as the centuries went on, and Jane Austen has far eclipsed them and many male authors as well. And so these women have largely faded into oblivion. Some of them are experiencing a bit of a revival nowadays for various reasons, which Rebecca Romney goes into in the book. But most people had never heard of them, other than maybe coming across their name possibly in Austen's books, until recently, when they're gaining some of them are gaining wider attention. I had heard of most of them because I had seen them mentioned in Jane Austen's books and in her letters. I have read some of them as well. Not all of them, but I'd read some books by some of them. So it was very interesting. I definitely added more books to my TBR. I'm interested in reading more books by these authors. The other thing I want to say about it is I liked the information that Rebecca Romney shared about these women. She gave a brief biography of their lives, and some of their lives were genuinely like terrible and tragic. And I just felt, sorry, flying creatures. I felt so bad for them. And some of them wrote out of a place of deep pain. So that part, I really did enjoy getting to hear their biographies and more about them, and learning about these women that I knew nothing about except for Fanny Burney. I knew quite a bit about her before I read this book. The others I knew almost nothing. I also enjoyed the tidbits of information that she shared about the rare book industry and how to find rare books. And it was just part of the journey, because she was looking for specific editions of these books she was talking about. And she is a rare book collector, both privately and professionally. So she had a lot to say about that. And that was very interesting because it's an industry I know nothing about, but of course I find interesting because I am a reader. And I do like interesting books and old books and rare books, but I know nothing about it and how that industry works. So that was interesting. My only complaint is that I feel like Rebecca Romney is an ardent feminist, which is her right to be, of course. But I do think that that perspective kind of shaded some of her conclusions and inferences of things that she read, statements that she read that people have made, or that authors made about Jane Austen or authors made about other authors, etc. I found that to be a little bit much.
Later, the same day, I got interrupted when I was recording earlier, so I am finishing up this now. Although really I was finished pretty much talking about that book. I would say overall I enjoyed it, minus the feminist overtones and that I disagreed with, and some of the conclusions I thought were a little bit faulty because of the author's bias. But in general, I really enjoyed it and would give it 4 stars. And I also really enjoyed reading it with Cheryl. As I told her, I have never buddy read a nonfiction before, I don't think. So that was fun. I wasn't sure how that would go, but it actually worked out really great. And we had a lot of fantastic discussion, left her really lengthy, rambling messages for each other. So that was fantastic. And I started The Gossip Story by Jane West, which is a book that more than likely Jane Austen read. Whether she liked it or not is anybody's guess. Her comments that exist about the author, Jane West, are sort of ambiguous because she could be, being her normal teasing, humorous self. It's hard to read, honestly, especially taken out of context as the quote was that I read. So it's hard to say, but it is true that the plot of the book that I'm reading by Jane West, The Gossip Story, is very similar and has exact same themes as Sense and Sensibility. Both feature 2 sisters. One is sensible and one is emotional and romantic. And it's a debate on the merits and drawbacks of those types of philosophies, I guess. Clearly, it seems to be a springboard for Sense and Sensibility. Jane Austen started writing Sense and Sensibility when she was young, shortly after that book was published. So it seems to have sparked some creativity in her. So more than likely she read it. It just seems to be too coincidental. So I've started that, but since I also finished Jane Austen's bookshelf, I need to draw another card to get another book in the works, since right now I only have 2 going, Emma and the Gossip Story, and we can't have that. So here is my deck of cards. Where should we put it here? And a 9. I have not gotten a 9 yet. And a 9 is on the cover. Red, white, or blue. Food, or stars, or stripes. Well, of the books that are definitely in my TBR that I like to pick up next, Charlotte has blue. It does say red, white, or blue. And I would say this one has red, white, and blue. Or for 3 points, if it has food, no food. And for 5 points, stripes or stars. There are sadly no stars in that sky, or stars over here, or stripes. Nothing. So for 1 point, I can do either one of these. Alternatively, I could go rogue and ditch my TBR, but I think I really do want to read this, and this is for Chantel's Raid Your Shelf Challenge. The prompt is royal, so I think I'll do this for 1 point, red, white, and blue on the cover. So this will be the next one I pick up, but I want to get a little bit further in the Gossip Story before I read this. So this will be the next one though. Later, the same day. It's actually like almost 10 o'clock at night, but I finally finished What Kitty Did Next by Carrie Kableen is the author's name. It was a debut novel by this author. I don't know exactly when it was released, but anyway, it was a continuation of Pride and Prejudice, and it tells the story of Kitty Bennet, and it was well done overall. I think I've not said a lot about it. I think I mentioned already that I felt like some of the writing was a little bit inconsistent, and it definitely was very slow moving. The plot was very slow moving, and it was kind of a little bit on the long side. I mean, maybe isn't fair because truthfully, Austen's novels are longish and they don't exactly move quickly, but I think maybe they're more engaging as you go through the story. But we can't all be Jane Austen, right? So I did overall enjoy it. There was a bit of a twist. As I was reading it, I was like, oh, interesting. Like she's going a different direction from what Austen had said, because Austen apparently had told her family that Kitty Bennet married a vicar. I think one in a living owned by Darcy. I think she specified. I don't remember if that's in the book or if that's just what she told her family. But anyway, that's become an accepted conclusion to Kitty Bennet's story. And when we started, I was thinking, oh, she has departed from this. And spoiler alert, she hadn't actually. It just, there was a twist. And I did not really expect that. I'm also not super sure that it is logical and reasonable. Don't know if it would actually happen that way, but it was very clean. It was free of any sort of, modern stuff thrown into a story, which always gets me when they try to reconstruct a classic author story into something that's trying to make a modern statement about things, cultural statement. There was none of that. It was just following up on Austen's story as she had said that it would end. And overall, it was well done. And it was possibly one of the better Austen retellings. Well, I would say definitely. It was one of the better Austen retellings I have read, or continuations, fan fiction, whatever you want to call it, however you want to class it. Maybe not perfect, but definitely one of the better ones. And I did enjoy overall. So 3.5 stars, which is, I enjoyed it. It was great. I probably will never read it again, but I do recommend it. I think that a lot of people will like it if you are an Austen fan and you like to read retellings, etc., that sort of thing. So
because I finished that, it is time for me to draw another card. Not that I will pick this up because, yeah, when I said in my previous clip, I said that I was only reading Emma and the Gossip Story, but I forgot that I hadn't quite finished What Kitty Did Next. I had like 2 or 3 chapters left, so I just finished that real quick. And I added The Other Princess to my stack. That will be the next one I pick up, but I want to get a little further in Gossip Girl before I do that. So this one, again, that I'm choosing now will also be, you know, further on, maybe later this week, maybe another day or 2. I might pick it up depending on how readable the other books I have in progress are. So, all right, shuffled. So, not looking. And is it a 9? I just got a 9. I don't want another 9. So I could pick another one. Not looking. Oh, here's another poll one. 7 is for a poll. Here's the thing, because there's only one other book in my TBR that I want to read. And that is, I think, including all of the books even that I hope to read. Not even like just the ones I definitely want to read, because I think I'm like getting all these knocked out. All right, so I've started A Gossip Story already. The Other Princess is next in line. Already read The History of England. Already read Not a Sparrow Falls. I'm reading Emma. I read Jane Austen's Bookshelf. Georgette Hare is the only other one that I had on there as a possibility. Okay, well, I can do that. I can do a poll. Because this actually, Charlotte would be for the same category. This is in the Jane Austen July prompts, is to read a retelling of an Austen work or a work set in Regency times. And so I have Charlotte is on my TBR for that, but also Georgette Hare was a possibility. And I have a few by her. Let's see, Friday's Child, Cotillion. I read The Quiet Gentleman already. Then I read I did, yeah? I think I did recently. Actually, I don't know if I did. I don't think I did. Doesn't sound familiar. The Quiet Gentleman. Huh. And I've read Frederica. I don't want to reread it quite yet. Okay, so The Quiet Gentleman, Cotillion, or Friday's Child. Or Charlotte. So I could throw Emma M. Lyon in there because I want to read volume 7 of Emma M. Lyon. Okay, so I think I'll do that. I'll put a poll of Friday's Child or Cotillion. I'll figure out which one of those 2 I want to do. One of the Georgette Hares, Emma M. Lyon, or Charlotte. That's what I'm going to do. All right, I'll let you know what the results are. Well, hello friends. It is Thursday evening, and I never updated on the results of the poll. Well, you don't know that. I mean, the passage of time is not quite the same in this video as it is in my life. But anyway, update on the poll from my last draw of 7. And that is Cotillion by Georgette Hare. I think I've read this one before, but let me just read the synopsis because I have no idea what this one is about. So I have a bit of a battered back cover here, so I have no idea what the first word of the synopsis is. So we're going to start with the second word and we're going to guess what the first word is, okay? The promise of her guardian's vast fortune on the occasion of her marriage, the orphan Miss Kitty Charing presents a most alluring prospect to the man who wins her hand. But the lady herself has no intention of winning any of her fortune-hunting beau. Smart girl. Instead, she shocks everyone by running away, perhaps not so smart, straight into the arms of the elegant Mr. Stanton of London. Very much aware that a lady alone in a strange city can be a scandalous and dangerous enterprise, the resourceful miss, like a resourceful miss, makes Stanton a daring proposal of her own. To her great relief, the confirmed bachelor agrees to her bold suggestion, wow, and promptly whisks her off to fashionable Berkeley Square.
Kitty is soon swept up in a gay whirl of glittering balls and society intrigues, but the most thrilling moment of all comes when she realizes that the man she has vowed to wed, in such uncommon haste, has completely captivated her wayward heart. How very interesting. Marriage of convenience, perhaps? I don't know. Can't tell if they actually get married or just agree to marry each other. No idea. But that is, I haven't started it yet. The poll was completed like a day or two ago, and so I know that's what I'm going to be picking up, but I haven't yet. Also, haven't picked this up yet. What have I been doing? I don't even know what I've been doing. Yesterday, I don't know what I was doing. I was running errands and, here, there, and everywhere, chauffeuring children around, etc., all that kind of stuff. And then today, I went to Hillwood Estates with my sisters, and that is the estate that was owned in DC by Marjorie Merriweather Post, whose novelized biography I read recently, if you recall. And my sisters and I went there to see her place. This was the second time I'd been there, and I enjoyed it just as much this time around. The gardens were amazing. So I have a separate vlog about that I will be sharing because it was just too much B-roll to try to put into this weekly reading vlog. So I will be sharing that hopefully with you next week. So that's where I was all day today, and I brought my Kindle along, of course, to read in the car, but I only got a couple pages read. So, because, like chit chat and stuff, like who has time to read? I did want to say though, I have read more in the Gossip Story since I last updated, I believe. And I have some thoughts about it. It's interesting because it's definitely, I can see where it's the source material for Sense and Sensibility, but it is very different. It is nothing like Sense and Sensibility at the same time. And the story is told from the perspective of a narrator whose name is Prudentia Homespun, which is apparently a pseudonym that the author Jane Austen occasionally used. It's really kind of interesting because Prudentia Homespun sets herself up as like an observing bystander to the story. So it gives you a bit of a bird's eye view of what's happening, unlike Sense and Sensibility, where we get zoomed right in on Eleanor and Marianne, and with Austen's omniscient, free, indirect discourse, we really get a grasp of particularly what Eleanor is thinking, but also Marianne, what they're thinking and feeling. This is a much more further removed perspective on the situation, and okay, I'm only like 5 chapters in, so that may change, but I guess that's what this vlog is for, my ever developing, changing reactions to what is happening in a story, right? So I don't know if that will change, but right now I'm getting like a bird's eye view of their story from an observer who, by the way, isn't that intimately involved or intimately acquainted with the characters in the story that she's telling. Some of what she's sharing, actually, so far, everything that she has narrated has been hearsay, hence the Gossip Story. So it's a really interesting way to tell a story. It's an interesting framework for telling the story. Sorry to be redundant, but I find that interesting to start with. The language is not as readable as Austen's work, in my opinion. It's just that much more archaic, just that many more decades removed from our speech today. Plus, the author's style was definitely more verbose. And she also, at some points, is getting much more philosophical than Austen ever does in her books. And in particular, it's actually kind of funny because in chapter 4, I think it was, the previous chapter that I just read, she was kind of setting up her argument as to what she is trying to share thematically in this story. She's trying to explain what her moral is, if you will, about sense versus sensibility, and she is explaining why she felt a need to expound on this issue of sensibility, of overly romanticizing everything, of exaggerating emotion, etc. It actually was a really good defense of a Christian perspective on emotion being properly aligned under reason and will. And it wasn't a very I don't know what the word is. It wasn't an argument that was like where she, laid out her points and, it was like a clear-cut logical path through it. necessarily, but it was in general like a very Christian defense of her perspective, which I found interesting. It felt like I was reading an archaic version of a Christian fiction book. So that was really interesting. I enjoyed it, but what I enjoyed even more was when I turned the page and I get to chapter 5 and she says, okay, basically I'm going to put this in modern verbiage. She says, okay, I know some of you all got bored in that last chapter and you skipped it. That's okay. That's perfectly all right. I hope that everybody skipped it who thought it was boring, but I thought it was necessary to include it, but now I'm going to move on with the story. And I thought that was hilarious. That's the other thing about this story, is that the author is definitely inserting herself into the story. It's not an unseen narrator. She's definitely like, Prudential Homespun. Like, she's a character and she's telling the story. It's not, what is it called when the narrator is like not in the book? You know, like not a character. It's an invisible narrator. Is that what it's called? I don't know. Anyway, this is not an invisible narrator. This is an actual narrator. So anyway, that is what I'm reading today. And I'm very excited tomorrow. I am going to be hanging out with my friends tomorrow evening. I don't even know if I already told you this. I may have. I forget from one day to the next what I talked about in previous clips. So apologies if I already said this. I'm going to be meeting my friends to watch the Gwyneth Paltrow adaptation of Emma, and I'm very much excited about that. And we're going to, each of us, contribute some like tea items, even though we're doing it in the evening. It isn't really tea time, but I have this book, Tea Fit for a Queen, Recipes and Drinks for Afternoon Tea, introduction by Lucy Worsley. And it's a book published in Britain. It says, in association with historic royal palaces. But I picked it up somewhere along the way, like at a thrift shop or something. Let's see, cake, pastries, and tarts. I don't know, I think I don't want anything too complicated. Let's see. Yeah, probably something more like tea, breads, buns, and biscuits, page 50. Oh, look, on the page is so pretty. I love this. Okay, fruit tea cakes. Mixed spice. Okay, come on. What is mixed spice? Doable, totally doable. Ginger, pear, and sultana loaf cake. Does not look good, sorry. Date and walnut tea bread. I don't love dates. It looks good. I like the frosting on it. That looks like a good frosting. Oh, Chelsea buns I like, but I'm not gonna take the time to do that. Lemon curd biscuits. But I think my friend said she might bring lemon curd. All butter almond shortbread. Actually, if I could, I have seen like almond flour or shortbread recipes. That could be good. Orange biscuits with chocolate chips. That actually sounds really good. Orange scented currant scones. Chocolate fridge cake. Oh, I need digestive biscuits. But maybe I could pick some. And that would be very British though, right? Jam pennies. Oh, the little jam sandwiches. Sandwiches and savories. Nah. So I'm gonna make one of those. I'll let you know tomorrow. Maybe even have you make it with me. And then I'm gonna go watch Emma with my friends and have tea. It is Friday afternoon. Well, it's not quite afternoon, I guess. It's 11 something, whatever, that doesn't matter. I am going to make, I decided, these little meringue cups for the tea this evening. It's called mini meringues with summer fruit and elderflower cream. Now I'm going to be making some adjustments. One, I do not have elderflower cordial, so I'm going to try something else and we'll see how that works. Hopefully it is okay. Two, it's an English recipe, like British. So there are things like Celsius temperature, grams, which is not a problem because I have a scale. And like they use words like castor sugar and double cream. I'm going with that castor sugar is powdered sugar and that double cream is whipping cream. I'm going to assume that. So I'm going to have to, you know, kind of like make it work as I go along and we'll see. I have made meringues before, not always successfully. So we'll see. I mean, this is basically just a meringue. Just the presentation is particular. Okay, so first of all, preheat the oven to 110 degrees Celsius, which I believe is, I did an online calculator and it said 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I was cross-referencing against other recipes for meringue. like American recipes, and they all said 220 or 225 Fahrenheit. So let's go with 225. I'm gonna split the difference. I'm gonna set the oven for 225 and hope for the best. So oven is preheating. Then it says to line a large baking sheet with baking parchment and draw 8 rounds on top, spaced well apart using a 6 centimeter glass or cutter. Okay, so my biscuit cutter, I don't even know how many inches it is. Let's see. Let us measure. Wait, this ruler only has inches. Okay, we're just gonna have to calculate again. This is 2.5 inches. So let me convert that to centimeters or vice versa. So 6 centimeters is apparently 2.36 inches. So 2.5 inches is close enough, right? So parchment paper, next step. By the way, all those formulas for converting measurements, you know, that I learned in grade school, I don't know if you guys learned those in grade school too. I do not remember them. Some of them I recall being fairly complicated. And I just use my good friend the internet nowadays. Okay, parchment paper serrated edge is terrible. Probably should just pull out some scissors. Yeah, we're gonna pull out the scissors. Might as well trim it up a bit more so it fits in the pan a little better. Okay, so you're supposed to draw 8 rounds on top, spaced well apart, and turn the parchment over so the pen is on the other side. Because yeah, you don't want ink on your... Makes perfect sense, right? Okay, so 8 circles, flipping the parchment. And I have already brought my eggs to room temperature. Egg whites are, of course, the primary ingredient. Now, here's the interesting thing. It calls for 2 large egg whites, and it says weigh the egg whites into a large spotlessly clean bowl. Note the weight and double it, and then that's how much powdered sugar or caster sugar you are supposed to use. So I have my handy dandy kitchen scale. Sixty-five grams of egg white. So that means I need 120, 130 grams of caster sugar. So instead of powdered sugar, I am using a blend of monk fruit and erythritol. And that I have put in my little Vitamix to conveniently make some powdered sugar. So I'm going to measure out 130 grams and see how much that is, because the American recipes I was looking up all had 1/3 to 1/2 cup of powdered sugar to go with 2 egg whites. So I'm going to compare and see how much that is and see more conversions. More conversions are going to be happening here. Okay, so I didn't do any actual conversions, but I measured out 130 grams of powdered sugar, and then I measured out of that 1/2 cup, and there's still at least another 1/4 cup left over, so it looks like it's about 3/4 cup or so, and that just seems like a lot to me. I think 1/2 cup is the most I would need, so I'm gonna go with that and hope it doesn't, you know, like ruin it. Maybe you need more to make it stiffer. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little cream of tartar to this recipe, which will help stabilize the egg whites and also add a little potassium. Get that ready. But first, we're going to beat up the egg whites a little bit before we add that. So the recipe says, and I quote, "Whisk the egg whites for a couple of minutes until they stand in firm peaks. They're ready when you can turn the bowl upside down over your head and the mixture stays exactly where it is." Does anybody want to volunteer to hold a bowl of egg whites over your head upside down? Not me. But we'll see if there's any slippage if I turn it. I don't see any slippage. Looks like they're staying pretty put there. So I think we're ready, but I'm not putting it over my head. So then the next thing is to continue beating it, adding a tablespoon of powdered sugar at a time until such time as, what does it say? Making sure that each tablespoon has dissolved into the mixture before adding another. Continue until all the sugar is mixed in. So here we go. Next, the recipe says, spoon the mixture evenly among the outlined rounds using the back of the spoon to make a dip in the top of each. So I could get fancy and use like a decorating bag, but instead I'm going to just do what they say. I also don't know how much. It just says evenly, though. We're just gonna eyeball it. Okay, we're just gonna put a mound in there that fits inside the round, okay? Also, one of the recipes, this says to bake it for an hour and a half, which seems reasonable to me. One of the recipes I was looking at said 45 minutes, but I'm thinking that they must have made smaller meringues than that one. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm gonna go with. So I'm just gonna, like, before I get serious about shaping them, I'm just going to evenly divide this into my 8 rounds because I don't know how else to do that. All right, I think I more or less have 8 even mounds. So now I'm gonna try and shape them a little bit and see. Okay, so they were in the oven for, it's not quite an hour and a half with the oven on. And then I left them in the oven with the oven off for another 45 minutes to an hour. They got a lot browner than I wanted, but I think that might be the sugar that I used, the not sugar. I think it just browned faster. That's my thought. That's what I'm going with. We're sticking with that. I actually made some cranberry curd, which used up the egg yolks from the meringue recipe and the powdered sugar that I had ground. So I'm gonna put, I think, a little bit of that in each of these wells. Then I'm gonna make the cream and put that on top, but that will be like a last minute addition just before serving. Okay, aside from actually putting them all together, this is the final step of the recipe. I'm going to make the cream that goes in them. And it calls for 150 milliliters of double cream. Like I said, I'm assuming that's heavy whipping cream. And my measuring cup has milliliters in it, so that was easy. No conversion necessary. So I am going to whip that up. It also says to whip at the same time with the cream 1 to 2 tablespoons of elderflower cordial. I do not have cordial, elderflower, or otherwise, so I'm substituting. I'm gonna do something and hope for the best. I'm going to use this citrus orange extract and this syrup, vanilla flavored, and between the two of them it'll be 1 to 2 tablespoons no more than, probably more like 1.5 tablespoons. And I'm going to add it after I've whipped them up a little bit, and we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Pretty good.
You think I should refuse him? You did not plan to return an answer favorable to this claim. No, I did not. That is, I did not mean, well, I was not sure. That is why I came to you. Oh, it's not my place to intrude, but that depends on what...
Plot twist. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I was not actually able to attend the Emma watching event, so I did it myself at home with my little meringue tarts. I watched some of the, like, there was a playlist on YouTube with highlights from the 1996 Gwyneth Paltrow Emma, so I watched those. And that was fun. And had some tea and ate my little meringue tarts. So that was great. But now I just want to wrap this up and give a quick update. So I mentioned about the gossip story that it was kind of like a bird's eye view, and that we didn't really get an up-close look at the two main characters and their stories or whatever. Well, that definitely changed, actually, like in the very next chapter that I read. But it was kind of inexplicable. It was not explained how the narrator was able to know about the circumstances that she was sharing that happened in private in the home of people that she did not know intimately, that she only knew through others. So I'll let you know if it turns out at some point later on in the book that, you know, how she came by this information. But as of now, it's just like the story, the way it was being narrated just completely shifted to an internal look at the inner goings on in the household of the characters in question, rather than just hearsay and gossip from the town gossip, which was the format originally in the first 5 to 6, 7 chapters. So now I'm like 10 chapters in or so, and that's the situation right now, and we'll see what happens. As of the moment, I kind of have an inkling where some things are going to go, but I really don't know overall. And I started The Other Princess as well, and oh my goodness, the first chapter was brutal. Yeah, that was really hard to read. Hopefully the whole book is not like that, because, you know, like I skimmed over a paragraph or two in the first chapter because I could see words, and I was like, nope. I don't need to read that in detail, and I'm not going to say any details. But it was hard to read. I'm sure that in the coming chapters of the book, there will be more tragedy and trauma and emotional trials and difficulties. But I'm hoping that it sticks to that sort of thing, like more like, you know, emotional and not actual physical brutality, because I can't do much of that. It's too much. So anyway, it's off to a rough start. Not that, I mean, it's well written and everything, and it's a good book, and it's important to read about it. I'm not saying that it's not. It's just hard for me to read, and I can't have a steady diet of that too much. But I'm going to keep pressing on, and hopefully that aspect is now done with. That is all I have for this week, although that's more than enough. So thanks for sticking with me and watching this, and I will see you next time.